"You are not even close to the woman my mother is," my daughter-in-law, Valerie, declared, her words sharp as shattered glass. That evening, as I presented the dessert I had lovingly prepared, a heavy silence descended upon the dining room. My heart hammered against my ribs. Instinctively, I pushed my chair back and retorted, "Then she can start covering your rent." My son, Robert, turned a ghastly shade of white. "Rent? What rent are you talking about?" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. In that precise moment, I knew my life was irrevocably altered, and this revelation was merely the prelude to a saga none of us could have anticipated. My name is Shirley. I am 70 years old, and on that fateful night, I discovered that a mother's boundless affection could tragically become her most significant vulnerability. For 6 months, I had been secretly footing the $800 monthly rent for the apartment where Robert and Valerie resided. I felt it was my solemn obligation to support my son through his financial hardships. It never occurred to me that while I was depleting my life savings, they viewed me as a liability, as someone beneath them, someone they could humiliate without repercussion. It had all begun 6 months prior when Robert, his eyes brimming with tears, sought me out to confess he had lost his employment and they were struggling to meet their rental obligations. "Mum, it will only be for a few months until I secure new employment," he'd pleaded, his voice cracking in that way that always disarmed me. Like any devoted mother, I didn't hesitate. I accessed my savings, the funds meticulously accumulated over years of diligent work as a seamstress, and began remitting their rent without Valerie's knowledge. "It's our secret, Mum," Robert had implored. "I don't want Valerie to feel diminished by relying on you." How tragically naive I was to believe he was shielding his wife's pride, when, in reality, he was safeguarding his own image as a provider. While I meticulously managed every dollar to assist them, they lived as if their circumstances were unchanged. They indulged in dining out, purchased new attire, and planned vacation getaways that I knew were beyond their financial means. The dinner that evening was meant to be special. I had spent the entire day preparing his favorite meal: chicken in a mushroom sauce, rice accompanied by a medley of vegetables, and that vanilla pudding he'd adored since childhood. The table was meticulously set with the crystal glassware I inherited from my own mother and the silver cutlery I reserved for significant occasions. Valerie arrived, resplendent in an elegant crimson dress and footwear that likely surpassed my entire monthly grocery budget. From the moment they entered, I sensed an altered atmosphere. Valerie wore that strained smile I recognized all too well, the one she deployed before delivering unpleasant news. Robert appeared uneasy, his gaze evasive and his fingers constantly toying with his mobile device. Throughout the meal, the conversation was strained. Valerie found fault with everything: the temperature of the food, the decor of my home, even the scent of the air freshener in the living room. "Don't you think it's perhaps time you gave this place a bit of a refresh?" she had remarked with that condescending tone that always grated on me. My mother's residence is considerably more contemporary. She possesses those fashionable minimalist furnishings. I offered a smile, attempting to maintain civility. Yet internally my frustration simmered. I had resided in that house for 30 years. Every item held a cherished memory. Every nook whispered a story. When it came time for dessert, I harbored the hope that we might finally share a pleasant interlude. I had crafted the pudding with immense care, recalling how Robert would devour it as a boy, proclaiming me the finest cook in the world. Instead of gratitude, however, I was met with those words that pierced my soul like a volley of thorns. "You are not half the woman my mother is." The impact of those pronouncements was akin to a physical blow. I stood frozen, the pudding spoon suspended mid-air, a knot of emotion tightening in my throat. Valerie regarded me with a malevolent smirk as if she had been patiently awaiting the opportune moment to inflict pain. Robert, meanwhile, had lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. In that instant, I comprehended his complicity in his wife's calculated cruelty. "Excuse me?" I managed to articulate, my voice quivering, though I had heard her with absolute clarity. Valerie leaned back languidly in her chair with a show of false grace, as if she were the proprietor of my home, and repeated her pronouncement with amplified cruelty. "You heard me perfectly well, Shirley. My mother is a woman of significant achievement and independence, a woman who forged her own prosperous enterprise. She has never been beholden to anyone. She owns her own company, a beachfront property in Florida, and travels extensively throughout Europe. You, on the other hand, well, your talents are confined to culinary endeavors and needlework." Each word struck me like a hammer blow to the heart. I reflected on the countless years I had toiled from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, sewing elaborate gowns for sweet 16 celebrations, tailoring suits for grooms, and meticulously embroidering tablecloths for other people's weddings, all while never having the opportunity to plan my own. I remembered the sleepless nights when Robert was feverish, how I had to part with my meager jewelry collection to fund his university education, and the double shifts I worked to ensure he had every necessity. "Valerie, please," Robert murmured weakly, lacking the fortitude to offer any genuine defense. Those two hushed words were more devastating than silence, for they confirmed his alignment with his wife's agenda, his participation in this orchestrated humiliation. My son, the very boy who once declared me his hero, was now permitting me to be treated as a mere servant within my own home. "No, Robert, permit me to conclude," Valerie continued in that shrill tone she adopted when aiming for an air of superiority. "Your mother requires the unvarnished truth. My mother would never permit her son to languish in such mediocrity." She gestured dismissively, her hand sweeping towards my dining room, a space replete with precious memories. She would have facilitated our acquisition of something superior. She would not have perpetuated our financial struggles with her hollow benevolence. It was at that precise juncture that something within me fractured. It was not solely the flagrant injustice of her pronouncements, but the sheer, unadulterated ingratitude of an individual who had been subsisting on my generosity, blissfully unaware. For 6 months I had been the sole provider for the roof sheltering their presumptuous existence. I had foregone essential medication for my arthritis to ensure their comfortable dwelling. I rose slowly from my seat, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. "Very well, Valerie," I stated with a composure that surprised even myself. "If your mother is indeed so superior, if she is so demonstrably a better woman than I, then I believe it is time for her to assume the responsibilities befitting a woman of such accomplishment." Robert regarded me with a look of bewildered confusion, while Valerie maintained her smug smile, as if she had already claimed victory. "Precisely, Shirley. I am gratified that you have finally grasped your standing within this family." "Oh, I comprehend my position with absolute clarity," I responded, my voice gaining an unwavering firmness with each word. "And my position no longer encompasses the payment of $900 monthly for your residence at 420 Hamilton Street, Unit 3. The ensuing silence was so profound I could discern the ticking of the kitchen clock. Robert sprang to his feet with such alacrity that he overturned his water glass. "What rent?" he demanded, his eyes wide, looking at me as if I had uttered an indecipherable foreign tongue. "What exactly are you implying, Mum?" Valerie's air of arrogance had completely evaporated. Her expression now conveyed a mixture of sheer terror and profound bewilderment that afforded me immense satisfaction. The rent, the very sum I have diligently remitted each month since February, I continued, relishing every moment of their stunned confusion. $900 that is debited from my account on the 5th day of every month, plus the additional $100 in fees the landlord levies for direct deposit, a total of $1,000 that I contribute so that you may reside in comfort while simultaneously disrespecting me. Robert sank back into his chair as if his legs had suddenly lost their strength. But you led me to believe you had made arrangements with the landlord, that he was granting you an extension to procure the funds, he stammered, his voice choked with emotion. Valerie fixed him with a furious glare, the likes of which I had never witnessed, as if he were personally responsible for sabotaging her moment of triumph. I fabricated that, I admitted without a trace of remorse. I lied because I believed I was assisting my son. I perceived it as a temporary measure. I harbored the conviction that you would eventually acknowledge my sacrifice. However, I now perceive that, to you, I am merely a foolish old woman deserving of humiliation. Valerie attempted to regain her composure, but her voice had lost its former assured haughtiness. Surely I was unaware. Robert never informed me that you were covering the rent. She began to stammer incoherently, but I cut her off with a raised hand. Your excuses are of no interest to me, my dear. If your mother is as exceptional as you proclaim, I am certain she will be delighted to assume this responsibility. After all, a woman of such success and independence would encounter no difficulty in covering her daughter and son-in-law's rent, would she? The sarcasm in my tone was so palpable that even Robert visibly flinched. The atmosphere in the dining room was so thick one could have sliced it with a knife. Valerie's gaze flickered between Robert and myself, as if she were rapidly calculating the ramifications of my revelation. Robert's hands trembled and beads of perspiration dotted his forehead. "Mum, why didn't you just tell me the truth?" he finally inquired, his voice cracking. "Why did you allow me to believe you had somehow reached an agreement with the landlord?" Robert's question echoed in the dining room like a painful accusation. "I lied because you are my son, Robert, because when you arrived at my home in tears, confessing that you had lost everything and were without funds, even for sustenance, I could not stand idly by and witness the child I raised, the man I cherish above all else, suffer." Valerie remained silent, but I could discern the frantic workings of her mind as she processed the implications of my disclosure. The rosy hue from her expensive cosmetics had completely drained from her complexion, leaving her looking ghastly. Robert ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he had employed since his childhood, whenever he felt nervous or frightened. "I lied," I continued, my voice strengthening, "because I believed it was a transient situation, because I held the hope that once you regained financial stability and secured steady employment, you would express your gratitude. I never fathomed that while I was forgoing necessary medication for my arthritis, while I was abstaining from purchasing meat to save those $900 monthly, you two were conspiring to humiliate me within my own residence." Robert attempted to interject, but I raised my hand to silence him. "No, now you will listen to me, Robert. For 6 months I have subsisted on rice and eggs for my evening meals. I have worn the same pair of dilapidated shoes because I lacked the funds for new ones. Do you know what I did last week? I pawned your father's wedding ring. That ring, which I had cherished as my most precious memento, solely to cover your rent and ensure I had provisions in my refrigerator." Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of incandescent rage, not sorrow. I had parted with the sole tangible remembrance of my husband, of the man who had loved me for 30 years, to support a couple who deemed me inferior, mediocre, and unworthy of respect. Valerie finally found her voice, though it was now small and quavering. Shirley, I truly had no idea. Robert never disclosed that you were bearing the financial burden. But I interrupted her with a look that could have melted steel. Naturally, you were unaware, my dear, because your husband elected to deceive you as well. He preferred that you believe he had procured the funds independently rather than admit his reliance on his mother. Mediocre. I spat out the word with such venom that Valerie visibly recoiled. Robert finally erupted. Mum, I never intended for things to unfold this way. You insisted. I never asked you to make such profound sacrifices. His voice conveyed a desperate tone, reminiscent of a child caught in a falsehood, but his words only intensified my fury. I insisted, I thundered, finally losing my composure. You arrived at my home weeping inconsolably like a 5-year-old. You claimed you could not afford basic sustenance, that Valerie wept nightly from the shame of being unable to meet your obligations. What kind of mother would I have been had I turned you away? The ensuing silence was devastating. Robert's gaze shifted to Valerie, laden with reproach, which she returned with equal intensity. It became abundantly clear that a web of secrets and deceptions enveloped them both, and that neither had been entirely forthright with the other. You know what truly pains me, Robert? I continued, the tears now streaming down my wrinkled cheeks. It is not the financial aspect. It is not the sacrifice involved. It is that throughout all these months, on each occasion you visited, I perceived disdain in your eyes. Valerie dissected my home, my cooking, my attire, my manners, all while remaining oblivious to the fact that my resources were securing her shelter. And you simply allowed it to transpire. Robert attempted to approach me, but I took a deliberate step back. Mum, please allow me to explain. There is nothing to explain. I cut him off sharply. The explanation has already been provided. Your wife believes I am not half the woman her mother is. Very well. Then her mother can demonstrate her mettle by shouldering her own responsibilities. Valerie finally mustered the courage to speak, though her voice still trembled. Shirley, my words were spoken in a moment of... I was preoccupied with other concerns. I interrupted her with a bitter laugh. You are preoccupied with the notion of dining in the home of the very woman who covers your rent. Preoccupied with the necessity of feigning cordiality towards an individual you consider so profoundly inferior. The tension in the air was so palpable it could have been severed with a blade. Robert paced the dining room like a caged predator, while Valerie sat meticulously twisting a napkin between her trembling fingers. Do you comprehend the most poignant aspect of this entire unfortunate affair? I continued, a strange sense of tranquility washing over me. I genuinely believed we constituted a family. Upon my marriage to your father, Robert, I harbored aspirations of a large family, with grandchildren scampering through this very house, filled with joyous laughter and profound love during our family gatherings. After years of striving to conceive, when you finally arrived, I felt that God had bestowed upon me the most magnificent gift imaginable. Robert paused, his gaze meeting mine, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Mum, I love you. You know I love you. Love transcends mere words, my son. Love is manifested through actions. It is characterized by respect. It is demonstrated through protection. When your wife disparages me and you remain silent, when you permit her to humiliate me within my own home, when you resort to deception to conceal your financial dependence upon me, that, my son, is not love, that is expediency. Valerie abruptly stood, dislodging her chair in the process. This is insufferable. I will not endure another moment of this sermon. Robert, we are departing this instant. Her voice had regained a measure of its habitual arrogance, yet the panic was clearly visible in her eyes. No, Robert declared with uncharacteristic firmness, surprising both Valerie and myself. We are not leaving until this matter is fully resolved. Mum, please be seated. We need to engage in a rational adult discussion. However, my decision had already been irrevocably made. There remains nothing further to discuss, Robert. All has been laid bare. Your wife has unequivocally conveyed her sentiments regarding me, and you have demonstrated your agreement with her position. Commencing tomorrow, I will cease all rental payments on your behalf. If Valerie's mother is as formidable as she asserts, I am confident she will devise a means of assisting you. But, Mom, you cannot do this, Robert implored, and for the first time that evening, genuine terror flashed in his eyes. We lack the financial means. I was terminated from my employment 2 weeks ago. I intended to inform you after dinner. Robert's words landed in the dining room like a seismic shockwave. You were dismissed from your position 2 weeks ago? I repeated slowly, a fresh wave of betrayal engulfing me. And you divulged nothing to me. You allowed your wife to subject me to humiliation, fully cognizant of your complete reliance on me. My voice faltered on the final word, not from sadness, but from a fury so profound that my hands began to tremble uncontrollably. Valerie whirled around to confront Robert, her eyes blazing with indignant rage. What? You were fired 2 weeks ago and you neglected to inform me? I have been expending funds as if all were perfectly normal, while you... She was unable to complete the sentence. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob with dramatic intensity, akin to a theatrical performer in a melodrama. Valerie, please allow me to explain, Robert began, but she cut him off with a sharp gasp. Do not presume to tell me to calm myself. Merely yesterday I acquired those $400 shoes. Last week I reserved a spa appointment for my birthday. Robert, we are bankrupt, and you permitted me to indulge as if I were an imbecile. Her tears had completely obliterated her makeup, and she now appeared precisely as she was, a desperate and terrified woman. I observed the surreal spectacle unfold, experiencing a peculiar blend of satisfaction and profound sorrow. For months I had shouldered the immense burden of sustaining this couple, and now they were finally confronting the stark reality of their predicament. Robert appeared utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped, his face buried in his hands. Do you realize what is perhaps the most pathetic element of this entire situation, Robert? I inquired with a surprising degree of calm. Even now, having discovered your deception and the humiliation you have inflicted, my initial inclination is to inquire if you require assistance. That, my son, is the essence of a mother's response. That is the manifestation of unconditional love. Robert looked up at me, and for a fleeting moment I glimpsed the little boy who would rush to me whenever he was plagued by nightmares. Mum, I lost my job because I was late on 3 consecutive occasions. Valerie had been unwell, and I needed to attend to her, to take her to the physician. And Valerie abruptly cut him off with a look that could have killed. I was not unwell. I had appointments with my dermatologist for my aesthetic treatments. Do not attempt to utilize me as a pretext for your irresponsibility. The facade had completely crumbled. The sophisticated, superior woman who had graced my home had vanished, revealing a persona of vulgarity and desperation. Aesthetic treatments? I queried, incredulity coloring my tone. Are you suggesting my son forfeited his employment because he was obligated to escort you for cosmetic procedures, while I was compelled to liquidate my precious jewelry to finance your shelter? A laugh, so bitter it unnerved even me, escaped my lips. Robert approached me, his hands outstretched in a gesture of supplication. Mum, please, I recognize my transgressions. I acknowledge my failure to meet your expectations, but you cannot abandon us now. We have nowhere to turn. Valerie's parents are presently abroad. And Valerie interjected once more. My parents are not abroad. They are in town. You instructed me to convey that we were financially secure, so as not to cause them concern. One lie after another was being peeled away, much like the layers of a rotten onion. And now, how many positions have you relinquished, Robert? I inquired in a voice so low it was barely audible. How many times have you misled me? The ensuing silence was deafening. Robert could not meet my gaze, and Valerie had resumed her sobs, though this time they appeared more genuine, as if she had finally grasped the gravity of their circumstances. 3 jobs within the past 2 years, Robert. He finally admitted, his voice broken. I always concocted justifications. I invariably assured you it was a temporary situation, that companies were undergoing downsizing. He paused, then looked at me with those eyes that had once been my entire universe. Mum, I have a significant issue. I believe I have a genuine problem. For the first time that evening, I experienced a flicker of something akin to compassion. My son was not merely a fabricator of falsehoods. He was an individual in need of professional intervention. However, compassion did not negate the profound sense of betrayal. It did not mend the wounds inflicted upon my heart by his words and those of his wife. Robert, I stated deliberately, acknowledging that his admission was the initial step towards recovery. But I cannot continue to serve as your safety net while you exhibit no genuine effort towards change. I cannot persist in sacrificing my own well-being to sustain a life predicated on deceit. Valerie rose abruptly, dabbing her tears with the sleeve of her crimson dress. This is preposterous, Shirley. You are his mother. Mothers do not forsake their children. My mother would never subject me to such treatment. The arrogance had returned to her voice, serving as a defensive shield. Your mother has never encountered this situation because you have never been truthful with her, I responded with an icy detachment. And you are accurate in one respect, Valerie. Mothers do not abandon their offspring. However, I am not forsaking my son. I am preventing him from exploiting me. Robert approached me, gently taking my hands in his. They felt cold and trembled noticeably. Mum, I solemnly pledge to change. I will seek assistance. I will secure gainful employment. I will rectify this situation definitively this time. Kindly grant me one further opportunity. I gazed at those hands, once so small that I had clasped them when he was learning to walk, when he was fearful of the darkness, when he sought solace after a terrifying nightmare. Robert, how many final chances have I extended to you? How many times have you offered me the identical promise? He was unable to provide a response, for we both understood the unvarnished truth. I had lost track of the numerous times we'd had this exact discussion, filled with unfulfilled pledges and shattered aspirations. Your rental agreement concludes next month, I announced, gently extricating my hands from his. You have a period of 30 days to devise a resolution. Following that, I will no longer bear responsibility for your accommodation. Valerie made a hasty exit toward the entryway. Let's depart, Robert. I have no intention of remaining here to be subjected to humiliation by a woman who lacks comprehension of what kinship truly entails. However, Robert remained stationary. Valerie, you are welcome to depart if you wish. I need to converse with my mother. His voice carried a resolve I hadn't perceived in many years, and for a fleeting instant, just a single moment, I glimpsed a spark of the individual he could have become. Valerie halted abruptly upon hearing Robert's declaration. She turned with measured slowness, her countenance a complex blend of astonishment and unadulterated rage. Are you instructing me to leave after all that I have relinquished for this union? Her tone had escalated to a piercing, almost frenzied pitch, and she gestured animatedly as though orchestrating an unseen ensemble. Valerie, I implore you, I must address this with my mother. So much has transpired this evening. Robert attempted to interject, but she silenced him with an intake of breath so profound it likely roused the entire neighborhood. No, I am not departing. If you intend to grovel like a subservient creature before your mother, You shall do so with me present. She crossed her arms and positioned herself firmly in the middle of my dining area, an unyielding monument to obstinacy. Furthermore, this dialogue directly implicates me. If she ceases to cover our rent, where shall we reside? In a temporary shelter? I observed the unfolding scene with a mixture of captivated horror. In a single evening, the meticulously constructed facade of this couple had disintegrated, exposing the deceptions they had been perpetuating for months. It was akin to witnessing a vehicular collision in slow motion. Dreadful, yet utterly compelling. Valerie, I stated at length, I believe you have expressed yourself sufficiently for one evening. You have unequivocally conveyed your sentiments regarding me, and I have reciprocated with equal clarity concerning the pair of you. There is little more to deliberate. Indeed, there is a great deal more to discuss, she shrieked, her face as crimson as her attire. You cannot devastate our lives merely because a remark offended you. Families offer forgiveness. Kinfolk provide mutual support. The sheer hypocrisy of her pronouncement struck me like an affront. Families support one another, I echoed deliberately. Do you refer to the manner in which you have supported me this evening, or the way Robert has sustained me by concealing his employment status? Perhaps you allude to the manner in which you have bolstered me by permitting me to deplete my savings while you live as though nothing is amiss. Robert sank heavily into a dining chair, his head cradled in his hands. Mother, I acknowledge we have committed grievous errors. I am aware we have inflicted pain upon you in ways that are inexcusable, but if you abandon us now, we are truly left with no recourse. That is not my concern, I responded, the words emerging with a severity that surprised even myself. For 70 years I have been the caregiver. I tended to my parents until their passing. I nursed your father through his illness. I have looked after you since the day you entered this world. Do you comprehend the last occasion someone tended to my needs? When was the final instance someone evinced concern for my well-being? The ensuing silence was profound and deeply uncomfortable. Robert lifted his head and regarded me with an expression I hadn't seen since his childhood. That specific blend of remorse and dawning comprehension that surfaces when one finally grasps the gravity of a transgression. Never, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I have never concerned myself with your well-being. I always presumed your unwavering presence, your perpetual resilience, your inexhaustible capacity to resolve all difficulties. Valerie appeared to be rapidly losing her patience with this emotionally charged exchange. Enough of this theatrical display, Shirley. You are the mother. It is incumbent upon you to assist your son. You cannot simply declare that you no longer wish to fulfill your maternal role. Those words proved to be the ultimate catalyst. I advanced toward Valerie until I was mere inches from her visage, and when I finally spoke, my voice was so low and imbued with menace that she instinctively recoiled. Never under any circumstances lecture me on the nature of motherhood. I have been a mother for 35 years. I have surrendered my youth, my aspirations, my prospects, my finances, my health, everything for my son. What have you relinquished? Your aesthetic treatments? Your $400 footwear? Valerie attempted a retort, but I continued without affording her the opportunity. Being a mother does not equate to functioning as a perpetual cash dispenser. Motherhood does not entail tolerating indignity and disrespect. It signifies instilling in one's offspring the virtues of responsibility, self-reliance, and respect, and in that regard I have undeniably fallen short. Robert abruptly stood, dislodging his chair. Do not utter such sentiments. You have been a magnificent mother. It is I who have failed. It is I who have blundered. Yes, Robert, you have failed, I conceded. But I too have failed by allowing matters to reach this juncture, by permitting you to devolve into a man who deceives his wife, who deceives his mother, who allows the woman who nurtured him to be. Tears coursed down my cheeks, yet my voice remained resolute. Valerie had begun to pace the dining area like a creature confined. This is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. In-laws are meant to assist their daughters-in-law. We are supposed to be a cohesive unit. Kinship? I interrupted her with a sardonic chuckle. When precisely have you ever treated me as a member of the family, Valerie? When have you demonstrated respect, affection, or consideration toward me? From the very moment you met Robert, you have regarded me as an impediment, an annoyance you were compelled to endure to ensure your husband's contentment. That is untrue, she protested, her voice lacking conviction. Untrue? I inquired, folding my arms. Do you recall last Christmas when you suggested it would be more advantageous for you to observe the holidays in solitude, given my perceived lack of understanding of contemporary customs? Do you recollect when I offered to prepare a meal for your anniversary and you expressed a preference for something more sophisticated? Do you remember when you critiqued my attire, deeming my favorite purple dress inappropriate for women my age, suggesting more understated hues? Each instance I recounted inflicted a minor sting, and I could observe Robert flinch with every recollection. He had been present during all those occasions. He had overheard every disparaging remark, and he had never once offered a defense. Valerie, I continued, you never desired to be integrated into this family. You wished for this family's dissolution so that you might possess Robert entirely for yourself. Well, congratulations. It appears you shall achieve precisely what you desired. Robert approached me, his eyes brimming with tears. Mother, I implore you, if that is your wish, Shirley, then so be it, but do not come weeping to me when you realize you have irrevocably lost your only son. When you find yourself alone in this aged residence, surrounded by your musty recollections, remember that you possessed a family, and you banish them due to your misguided pride. Her words were crafted to inflict pain, to engender guilt, to shatter my resolve, and for a fleeting moment they almost succeeded. The vision of solitude within this house, devoid of visits, lacking phone calls without anyone needing me, was profoundly unsettling. Valerie's pronouncements reverberated through the dining room like a malediction aimed directly at my deepest apprehension: loneliness. For a spell, the panorama she had painted seized my imagination. I envisioned myself within this desolate dwelling, devoid of youthful laughter, absent of weekly phone check-ins, without a soul to acknowledge my birthday. The silence that descended was heavy, and I sensed Robert's gaze upon me, awaiting the erosion of my conviction. But then something remarkable occurred. Instead of succumbing to panic or despair, I experienced a profound and liberating serenity. You know what, Valerie? I stated deliberately, relishing each syllable. I would rather be alone and at peace than in company and subjected to humiliation. I prefer my treasured memories of a loving marriage and years of diligent labor to a life composed of new recollections founded on deceit and disrespect. Valerie blinked several times as if taken aback by my response. Robert's jaw dropped. He was slowly processing the fact that his final attempt at emotional coercion had utterly failed. Furthermore, I continued, a newfound vigor surging through me, I shall not be as isolated as you perceive. Just yesterday I received a communication that altered everything, but you two were so engrossed in plotting your evening's affront that I neglected to inform you. Michael Jenkins extended an invitation. The name reverberated through the dining room with the impact of an explosive device. Robert froze, and for the first time all evening, Valerie was rendered utterly speechless. Michael had been my companion during my college years. the man I had intended to marry before encountering Robert's father. He was an ambitious, intelligent individual who had opted to relocate to America in pursuit of greater prospects, while I chose to remain and establish a family. "Michael Jenkins," Robert murmured, his voice quavering. "The Michael from the photographs? Your collegiate sweetheart?" I nodded slowly, savouring the expression of utter astonishment on their faces. "The one and only. It transpires that after 40 years of establishing an engineering enterprise in Seattle, after raising 3 accomplished offspring and mourning the loss of his wife 2 years ago, he decided to reconnect with his former acquaintances. He located me on social media, and we have been conversing via telephone for the past fortnight." Valerie finally regained her voice, though it sounded strained. "What do you mean you've been conversing?" Her complexion had assumed a pallid, greenish hue that did not suit her at all. "I mean precisely that. We have conversed daily, reminiscing about past times, catching up on our respective journeys, our realized and unfulfilled dreams, and last night he presented me with a proposition that took my breath away." Robert approached me with hesitant steps. "What sort of proposition, Mother?" I smiled for the first time all evening, a genuine expression emanating from the depths of my heart. "He has invited me to spend a month at his residence in Seattle. He expresses a desire to showcase Washington State to me, to introduce me to his children, and that he has perpetually pondered what might have transpired had I accompanied him." I left the statement suspended, relishing the complete silence that had descended upon the dining room. "But, Mother," Robert stammered, "you cannot depart with a gentleman you haven't encountered in 40 years. What if he is a charlatan? What if he is deceiving you? What if—" "What if, Robert?" I interjected with a surprising firmness. "What if he proves to be a deceiver, much like yourself? What if he exploits me in the same manner you have? At the very least, with Michael I shall embark on an adventure, explore new locales and be esteemed for my intrinsic worth, not for my financial contributions." Valerie had slumped into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "This cannot be occurring. This is a dreadful hallucination. You cannot possibly be contemplating a departure with an individual you do not know." "Michael is not a stranger to me," I countered. "He is aware of my aspirations, my anxieties, my hopes, for we shared them during our youth. He knows I always long to travel, that I always wished to behold the Pacific Ocean, that I always dreamed of penning a narrative, chronicling my experiences as a seamstress. Do you comprehend the initial words he uttered upon contacting me? He said, 'Surely, I trust you have pursued all your dreams, for you are deserving of an exceptional existence.'" Tears began to stream down my face, but they were tears of elation, not sorrow. "When was the last time either of you inquired about my aspirations? When was the last instance you concerned yourselves with my happiness, my plans, or any desires I might have harbored for my life?" Robert attempted to approach me, but I raised my hand to halt him. "Michael has forwarded me images of his dwelling, of his garden adorned with crimson and golden blossoms, of the oceanic vista from his terrace. He has recounted his excursions throughout Europe, the literary works he has perused, the convivial dinners he prepares for his companions each Friday. And do you know what else he imparted to me?" Valerie lifted her head to regard me, her eyes red and clouded with resentment. "What did he tell you?" "He informed me that a woman of my age and with my accumulated experience is an invaluable asset. He stated, 'I possess stories to recount, sagacity to impart, and affection to bestow.' He conveyed that any gentleman would consider himself fortunate to share my company, my discourse, my companionship." My voice faltered slightly as I recalled those words that had mended wounds I hadn't even recognized existed. Upon concluding that conversation, I retired to my kitchen and wept for an entire hour. But my tears were not of sadness, they were tears of profound relief. I wept because someone had, at long last, reminded me that I am more than a mother, more than a provider, more than a domestic servant. I am a woman possessing intrinsic worth. Robert had turned ashen. Mother, I implore you, do not make any impetuous decisions based on the events of this evening. Michael might simply be articulating what you wish to hear. Con artists are exceedingly adept. Cease this! I exclaimed with a force that surprised even myself. Stop attempting to dictate my existence. Cease instructing me on my capabilities or limitations. For 35 years I have lived for you. Every decision I have made has been predicated on your welfare, your future, your happiness. For the first time in decades, I shall make a choice that prioritizes my own needs. The silence that ensued was deafening. Robert had collapsed into a chair, his head buried in his hands, weeping like an infant. Valerie regarded me with a peculiar mixture of animosity and trepidation, as if she had encountered a phantom.
Do you know what else Michael disclosed to me? I continued, my self-assurance escalating with each utterance. He mentioned that he has preserved a photograph of me from our youth, the one where I am wearing the ivory gown embellished with crimson blossoms that I fashioned myself. He conveyed that throughout these intervening years, particularly following his wife's demise, he would gaze at that image and contemplate whether I had found happiness, whether I had managed to realize my dreams. Robert looked up, his eyes swollen from weeping. And what did you convey to him? I articulated the truth. I informed him that I had experienced moments of felicity, particularly during your early years when your father was alive, when I believed I was constructing something beautiful termed a family. However, I also confessed that I had relinquished so much of myself in the process that I no longer recalled who Shirley was prior to becoming Robert's mother or Charles's widow. Valerie stood abruptly, as if stung by an insect. This is utterly preposterous. You cannot depart with that gentleman. What will people opine? A woman of your age pursuing amorous escapades like a youthful adolescent. I met her gaze directly and offered a smile, imbued with the serenity I hadn't felt in years.
Valerie, my dear, following tonight, the opinions of others constitute the least of my concerns. After all, if my own family regards me as inferior and unremarkable, what significance does the judgment of strangers hold? Robert finally mustered the strength to speak. Mother, if you genuinely wish to meet Michael, if you truly desire to travel, we can offer our support. Just do not act out of animosity. Do not imperil your existence merely to exact retribution upon us. Imperil my existence? I repeated incredulously. Robert, do you fail to comprehend? This is not a decision born of spite. This is a decision for self-preservation. For the first time in decades, an individual is extending me an opportunity to experience joy, to be valued, to be cherished for my authentic self, not for what I can provide. I walked to the dining room window and gazed out at the street where I had resided for so many years, where I had raised my son, where I had interred so many aspirations. Tomorrow I shall contact Michael and accept his invitation. I shall procure an airline ticket, pack a valise with my finest attire, and ascertain if it is still feasible to find happiness at the age of 70. The weeks that succeeded that dinner proved to be the most peculiar of my existence. Robert attempted to contact me daily for the initial week, leaving pleading voicemails on my answering device. I recounted my years of needlework, the bridal gowns I had meticulously crafted, the personal anecdotes each client had confided in me. It was an odd yet wondrous sensation to feel relevant once more, to feel that someone esteemed my experiences and memories. Shirley, he conveyed during one of our late-night telephone exchanges, I have been contemplating you for 40 years. When I wed my wife, when my children were born, When I established my enterprise, a part of me always wondered what might have transpired had I possessed the courage to invite you to America with me. His words imbued me with a warmth I hadn't experienced in decades. Michael, I too have thought of you on numerous occasions, I confessed, especially during arduous periods, when your father was ailing, when Robert began encountering difficulties. I often speculated about the trajectory my life might have taken had I boarded that aircraft with you. Well, he replied with that deep, resonant chuckle I remembered with perfect clarity, it is never too late to discover the answer, is it? The airline ticket rested on my bedside table, a tangible reality, akin to a covenant of liberation. Departure, March 15th. Destination, Seattle, Washington. Michael had been insistent on bearing the expense of the ticket, but I had declined his offer. This is my decision, my adventure, I had explained to him. I wish to fund it with my own resources. The funds I had meticulously saved over months, often at the expense of necessary medication and adequate sustenance. Money I would now allocate to something that would bring me contentment for the first time in years. 3 days prior to my journey, Robert appeared at my doorstep. He looked disheveled, gaunt, with pronounced shadows beneath his eyes. His clothing creased as though he had slept in them. "Mother, please, we must converse," he pleaded, his voice fractured, which, despite everything, resonated with my maternal instinct. I permitted him entry but maintained an emotional detachment. "Where is Valerie?" I inquired, preparing coffee in my modest kitchen. "At her parents' residence," he responded, sinking heavily onto a kitchen chair. "She departed a week ago. She asserts she cannot remain with me if I lack employment, if I cannot sustain the lifestyle she deems her due." He let out a hollow laugh. It seems her esteemed mother is not as supportive when it comes to financial assistance. They advised her to manage independently. A flicker of satisfaction, not entirely admirable, nonetheless irrepressible, coursed through me. "So what are your intentions now?" "I have been actively seeking employment with fervent intensity. I have submitted applications everywhere, Mother. Offices, eateries, shops, construction sites, anything. I am amenable to undertaking any task." He looked up, and I observed an expression in his eyes I hadn't witnessed in years. Genuine humility. "I have also commenced therapeutic sessions. I discovered a community center offering pro bono services. The therapist has been instrumental in helping me comprehend numerous facets of my personality that I had been unwilling to confront." His words seemed meticulously rehearsed, as though he had practiced this discourse numerous times before a mirror. "And what specific insights have you gained?" I inquired, curious to ascertain if a genuine transformation had occurred, or if this was merely another ruse. Robert paused, nervously fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I have come to realize that I never acquired the ability to be self-reliant because you were perpetually present to extricate me from difficulties. It is not your fault." He quickly added upon perceiving my expression, "It is mine. However, the pattern was established at a very early stage, and I never made the effort to disrupt it." I nodded slowly. "And Valerie, what have you learned regarding your relationship with her?" "That what I felt for her was not genuine affection. It was a form of emotional dependence. I found her demanding and critical nature appealing, as it provided me with a justification for not maturing, for continuing to be a child who required his mother's intervention." He paused and met my gaze directly. "Mother, I am aware that I do not merit your absolution. I recognize that I have irrevocably damaged our bond, but I need you to understand that for the first time in my adult existence, I am perceiving matters with clarity." "And what precisely do you perceive?" I asked cautiously. "I perceive a 70-year-old woman who devoted her entire life to a son who never acknowledged it. I see a woman who toiled relentlessly to provide me with an education and opportunities that I squandered. I see a woman who deserves happiness, who merits recognition, who deserves to pursue her own aspirations after decades spent pursuing mine. His pronouncements moved me, yet they also instilled a sense of caution. Robert, I am pleased you are contemplating these matters, but words are readily spoken. Genuine transformation necessitates time and consistent action. I understand, he affirmed, nodding emphatically, and I am not here to request that you cancel your excursion. I am not here to solicit funds or support. My purpose is to demonstrate through my actions that transformation is possible, even if you are no longer present to witness it. What exactly do you mean by that? Robert rose and began to pace my cramped kitchen. I have secured employment with a cleaning service. It involves overnight shifts and the remuneration is modest, but it is honest work and enables me to afford a small dwelling I've rented downtown. Furthermore, I am enrolled in online courses to obtain a certification in accounting. I observed him with genuine astonishment. When did you make the decision to pursue all of this? The evening immediately following our shared meal. Upon returning home, Valerie commenced berating me for jeopardizing our financial stability. Something within me simply fractured. I comprehended that I was 35 years of age and had never assumed accountability for my own existence, not for a single day. He resumed his seat and took my hands. Mother, I implore you to travel to Seattle. I wish for you to encounter Michael, to behold the expanse of the ocean, and to compose that novel you have perpetually aspired to write. My desire is for your happiness, even if my continued presence in your life is precluded. For the first instant since the night of our dinner, I felt as though I were conversing with my genuine son, rather than the manipulative, dependent individual I had known for so many years. Robert, you will forever remain an integral part of my existence. You are my son and you always will be, but I need you to grasp that the nature of our connection cannot persist unchanged. I comprehend entirely, he stated with conviction, and I want you to be aware that I am committed to endeavoring to become the type of son of whom you can feel proud, regardless of the time it necessitates, even if it becomes too late to mend our relationship. We remained in silence for several minutes, each absorbed in our own contemplations. Eventually, Robert spoke again. Will you share with me your recollections of Michael? What was he like during your youth? An unbidden smile spread across my countenance. He possessed brilliance, ambition, and a gentle spirit. He had a remarkable ability to make me feel as though I were the most captivating woman on earth. When we conversed, his focus was entirely on me, as if my pronouncements were the most significant words he had ever heard. Why did you not accompany him when he relocated to America? Because I was apprehensive, I confessed, fearful of departing from all that was familiar, fearful of encountering failure, and fearful of not being sufficient for him. Subsequently, I met your father, and he represented security, stability, and a predictable existence. I paused. I harbor no regrets regarding my choice of your father. He was a decent man, and we shared precious moments. However, I now have a second opportunity to ascertain what might have transpired had I possessed greater courage. Robert nodded slowly. Do you believe Michael has genuinely pondered you throughout these intervening years? Or do you suspect he is idealizing the past? Robert's query prompted profound introspection. You are aware, Robert, that I have posed that very question to myself each night since Michael re-established contact. Are his sentiments genuine, or are we merely two individuals of advanced years cherishing an idealized youthful affection? I arose and walked to the window, observing the garden where I had planted roses so many years prior. Yet, I subsequently realized that its significance is inconsequential. What do you mean by inconsequential? Robert inquired, genuinely curious. It matters not whether our feelings stem from nostalgia, idealization, or genuine love. What is paramount is that for the first time in decades, I feel vibrantly alive. I feel esteemed. I perceive myself as a woman worthy of admiration, courtship, and respect. I turn to face him. When was the last occasion I experienced such a sensation? When was the last time anyone rendered me feeling special simply for my inherent being? Robert lowered his head, exhibiting shame. I never evoked that sentiment in you, did I? I consistently took you for granted, an assumption that you would invariably be available, irrespective of my conduct towards you. Precisely, and it was not solely you, Robert, your father as well. Towards the conclusion of our marital union, he began to perceive me merely as the individual who prepared meals, maintained the household, and attended to his needs during periods of illness. I ceased being Shirley and became solely Charles's spouse, and thereafter merely Robert's mother. At that juncture, my telephone rang. It was Michael calling at the predetermined hour as always. I glanced at Robert, who gave a nod, signifying my approval to answer. "Hello, beautiful," Michael's voice emanated from the receiver, and an immediate sensation of familiar warmth permeated my chest. "How was your day?" "Interesting," I responded, a smile gracing my lips, despite the underlying tension. "My son is visiting, Robert. Would you care to exchange greetings with Michael?" Robert momentarily froze, then slowly inclined his head. I activated the speakerphone function. "Michael, I would like you to meet Robert, my son." "Robert, this is Michael Jenkins." "Hello, Robert." "Yes, sir. It is a complex situation, but I am beginning to comprehend that my mother merits happiness, even if it necessitates substantial alterations to our lives." "That is a remarkably mature sentiment," Michael replied with evident approval. "Allow me to share something with you, Robert. I have 3 offspring, all adults, and it took them years to recognize that their parents are complete individuals with their own unique requirements and aspirations, not merely perpetual sources of support and resources." Robert regarded me with surprise. It was evident he had not anticipated Michael's directness, coupled with such understanding. "Mr. Jenkins," Robert continued, "may I inquire about your intentions concerning my mother?" Michael emitted a soft chuckle. "That is a perfectly reasonable question. My intentions are to become acquainted with the woman the young lady with whom I fell in love 40 years ago has become. My intentions are to escort her to remarkable destinations, to introduce her to my children, to prepare meals for her, to listen intently to her narratives, and perhaps, should we both elect to do so, to cultivate a profound friendship or something more." "And if circumstances do not unfold as you anticipate," Robert inquired, "then we shall have experienced a splendid adventure. We shall have closed a chapter that remained open for many decades, and your mother will have enjoyed a well-deserved respite in Washington. There is no obligation, Robert, no unrealistic expectations, merely 2 individuals of advanced years, affording themselves an opportunity to rediscover contentment." Robert visibly relaxed. "Thank you for your candor, sir. Please refer to me as Michael. And now, if you will grant me permission, I would appreciate a private moment to converse with your mother." Robert nodded and retreated to the sitting room, affording me solitude for my telephone conversation. "How do you feel after speaking with him?" I inquired of Michael once we were alone. "I feel quite well. He appears to be a young man navigating a period of personal growth. That reflects favorably upon your upbringing, undoubtedly. Children who never encounter adversity fail to develop resilience." His words offered a greater measure of reassurance than I had anticipated. "Michael, are you certain you wish to introduce yourself into your tranquil existence with a woman entangled in such considerable familial complexities? Surely, my dear, we all experience familial complexities at our age. One of my sons underwent a divorce last year and has returned to reside in my home with his 2 young children. My daughter is experiencing a midlife crisis and contacts me in tears every Tuesday. My youngest son is grappling with an addiction to video games that is adversely impacting his marriage. He chuckled softly. Familial complexities are an inherent aspect of existence. The divergence lies in our approach to them, and you are managing yours with explicit boundaries, unwavering affection, and by consistently remembering that your children are adults, responsible for their own choices and their ensuing repercussions. That is a skill you appear to be cultivating as well. Following the conclusion of my conversation with Michael, Robert and I continued our dialogue well into the night. He provided further elaboration on his therapeutic journey, detailing his process of identifying behavioral patterns he had perpetuated for years without conscious awareness. Do you know what proved to be the most challenging aspect to accept during therapy? He posed as we sipped a second cup of coffee. What? That it was not merely a matter of my being indolent or immature. It was the development of an emotional dependency on being extricated from difficulties. Each instance someone resolved a predicament for me, each time I was provided with financial assistance or extricated from a precarious situation, I experienced a peculiar sense of euphoric relief. It bore a resemblance to a narcotic substance. His pronouncements resonated deeply within me. And how does one endeavor to surmount such an addiction? By confronting the consequences of my actions without seeking external intervention. When I was discharged from my most recent employment, my initial impulse was to seek refuge with you, presenting a mournful account. However, on this occasion, I opted instead to sleep in my vehicle for 3 days until I secured employment as a cleaner. You slept in your vehicle? I questioned with an automatic maternal inflection of concern. Indeed, and it proved to be one of the most profoundly significant experiences of my life. For the first time, I truly grasped the meaning of lacking a safety net, the implications of my actions having tangible repercussions. He met my gaze directly. Mother, during those 3 nights, I devoted considerable thought to you. I reflected upon all the occasions you were compelled to make a choice between your own needs and mine, and you invariably selected mine. That is the conduct of mothers, Robert. No, mother. That is the conduct of mothers who have not acquired the skill of establishing healthy boundaries. And that is the conduct of children who have never learned to function as responsible adults. He leaned forward. The therapist assisted me in understanding that by consistently rescuing me, you were inadvertently denying me the opportunity for growth. His words inflicted pain, yet they also brought liberation. For years, I had experienced culpability each time I contemplated declining Robert's requests. Each instance, I contemplated prioritizing my own needs. I now comprehended that my magnanimity had, in effect, served as a mechanism of control, perpetuating his reliance upon me. So what transpires now? I inquired softly. Now I intend to demonstrate, first to myself and subsequently to you, that I am capable of functioning as a responsible adult. I will manage my own financial obligations. I will make my own determinations. I will confront my own challenges. And when you return from Seattle, should you elect to do so, I will be a son of whom you can feel proud. And if I choose to remain in Seattle? Robert's lips curved into a smile, and for the first time in years, I detected genuine delight in its expression, devoid of any trace of manipulation. Then I shall be content for you. I will visit whenever feasible. I will contact you on a weekly basis, and I will pursue my own life, secure in the knowledge that my mother is finally embracing hers. The day designated for my departure arrived under a clear sky, accompanied by a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper premonitions of forthcoming adventures. Robert arrived punctually to convey me to the airport, and for the first time in years, a sense of ease permeated our interaction. He had procured a small arrangement of white daisies, a floral selection I knew to be my favourite, and a sealed missive. "Do not open it until you are aboard the aircraft," he stated with a shy smile. "It contains something I needed to convey to you, though I find writing it more facile than verbalizing it." En route to the airport, our conversation revolved around mundane topics, the prevailing weather conditions, current events, and his schedule for the forthcoming week. It constituted a typical exchange between a mother and her son, a rarity in recent years. There were no entreaties, no displays of drama, no expressions of guilt, simply a quiet dialogue between two individuals, bound by affection, yet finally understanding the principles of healthy boundaries. "Mother," he remarked upon our arrival at the airport, "I want you to be aware that irrespective of the eventualities in Seattle, this endeavor has already proven its worth." "What do you mean?" "Observing you in this state, brimming with excitement, apprehension, and happiness, I have not witnessed you radiate such luminescence in many years." He assisted me in retrieving my suitcase from the vehicle, a piece of luggage I had meticulously filled with my most elegant attire, including a new coral-hued dress I had purchased specifically for this excursion. At the airport terminal, Robert accompanied me as far as the security checkpoint. As the moment for our farewell arrived, we embraced with an intensity that had been absent since his childhood. "I love you, Mother," he whispered into my ear. "Enjoy yourself immensely. Embrace love, find happiness. You are more deserving of it than anyone in this world. I love you too, son, and I am proud of the man you are becoming." Once settled in my seat on the plane, I opened Robert's letter with hands that trembled slightly. His handwriting, which had always been somewhat haphazard, now appeared more refined, more deliberate. "Mother," it commenced, "throughout these past few days I have been reflecting upon all the instances you acted as a hero, unacknowledged by me, when you undertook double shifts to procure my textbooks, when you relinquished your new sewing machine to purchase me a bicycle, when you feigned a lack of hunger so that I might consume more, when you remained awake throughout the night attending to me during periods of illness, all those moments of silent devotion that I took for granted. I now comprehend that maternal affection does not necessitate self-abnegation to the point of vanishing. It entails loving sufficiently to impart independence. It requires courage to release one's grip when the opportune moment arrives. Thank you for ultimately loving me enough to permit me to mature. Soar high, Mother, both literally and figuratively, with all my affection and profound respect. Robert P.S. Michael is an exceptionally fortunate gentleman to be encountering the most remarkable woman on earth." Tears coursed down my cheeks as I returned the letter to my purse. Through the aircraft's window, I observed the clouds unfurling towards infinity, and for the first time in decades, I perceived my future as equally boundless. Michael was awaiting my arrival at the Seattle airport, holding a bouquet of yellow roses and a smile that I recognized instantly, despite the presence of additional wrinkles and his hair being entirely white. Upon glimpsing me, his countenance illuminated with the same effervescent joy I recalled from our university days. "Surely," he remarked as we embraced, "you are even more captivating than I remembered." The ensuing days unfolded as if I were immersed in a dream. Michael escorted me to the Pacific coastline, where for the first time in my existence, I witnessed the vastness of the ocean stretching towards the distant horizon. He introduced me to his children, who welcomed me with a sincerity that deeply moved me. His youngest daughter, Carmen, observed, "Dad hasn't smiled with such genuine delight since Mum's passing. Thank you for restoring his joy." Michael prepared elaborate evening repasts for me each night, which we savoured on his deck while observing the sunset. I am not a retired engineer. I am simply Michael, the individual who became enamoured with a brilliant young woman 40 years ago and never forgot her. His words resonated directly with my heart, as they articulated precisely my own sentiments towards him. I was no longer Robert's self-sacrificing mother. I was not Charles's widow. I was not the fatigued seamstress. I was simply Shirley, a woman possessing narratives to recount, aspirations to pursue, and affection to bestow. At the culmination of my month-long sojourn in Seattle, Michael presented me with a proposition that fundamentally altered my perception of what was achievable at the age of 70. Surely I do not wish for this to conclude. I am aware it may seem unconventional. I recognize we are merely rekindling our acquaintance after such an extended interval, but I implore you to contemplate relocating to Seattle, not with the immediate intent of marriage, nor to cohabitate if you are disinclined, but rather to afford us the opportunity to forge something extraordinary at this juncture of our lives. My initial inclination was to enumerate every conceivable reason for its impossibility. My residence, my limited circle of acquaintances, my established life in my hometown. However, I then reflected upon Robert, upon his letter, upon his pronouncements regarding soaring. I contemplated Valerie, who had likely never truly held me in high regard. I considered the countless years I had lived in service to others, deferring my own aspirations. What if the outcome is unfavourable? I inquired. Then we shall have had a remarkable adventure. But surely, what if the outcome is propitious? What if, after a lifetime of prioritizing others, you are finally presented with the opportunity to achieve complete happiness? That evening, I contacted Robert to apprise him of Michael's proposition. His response elicited surprise and filled me with profound pride. Mother, are you content with him? More so than I have been in decades. He treats me with kindness. He regards me with respect. He makes me feel valued on a daily basis. Then remain. Construct the life you are justly entitled to. I shall fare well. Indeed, I shall fare better, knowing that you are finally living for yourself. 6 months hence, I was engaged in the process of packing my most cherished possessions from my former residence, preparing for my permanent relocation to Seattle. Robert provided comprehensive assistance throughout this undertaking, exhibiting a maturity and sense of responsibility that instilled in me a deep sense of optimism for his future. Do you realize the profound irony of this entire situation? He remarked as we were engaged in packing family photographs. What? That by releasing you, I feel as though I have, in essence, regained you, not in the capacity of the maternal figure who continually intervenes to rescue me, but as the exceptional woman you have perpetually been, yet whom I never took the initiative to truly comprehend. As I compose this narrative from Michael's deck, gazing out at the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean and awaiting his return from the market, where he has gone to procure ingredients for our shared culinary endeavour, I contemplate the extent of the transformations that have transpired. Robert is successfully forging his own path in life. He has received a promotion at his place of employment. He is relocated to a superior dwelling and is currently involved with a woman who challenges him to evolve into a better individual, rather than enabling his dependency. Valerie, he informed me, has entered into matrimony with an older gentleman capable of sustaining her accustomed lifestyle, which is likely the most advantageous outcome for all parties involved. And I have finally come to understand that it is never too late to embrace happiness. I have learned that self-admiration is not synonymous with self-indulgence, but rather constitutes the fundamental basis for the capacity to love others in a wholesome manner. I have discovered that a woman of 70 years of age can embark upon adventures, can fall in love, and can initiate a new chapter in her life. Michael and I exchanged marriage vows last month in an intimate ceremony conducted on the beach, with his children and Robert serving as witnesses. Robert's eyes were moist throughout the entirety of the ceremony, yet these were tears of unadulterated joy. I never envisioned witnessing my mother marry for love, he confided in me afterward. I always presumed your union with my father was based purely on expediency and familial obligation. Now, as I reflect upon that mortifying evening when Valerie subjected me to public humiliation within my own home, I perceive it as the most profound gift I could have possibly received. For it was that humiliation that ultimately galvanized me into awareness. It was that humiliation that illuminated my inherent worthiness of more. It was that humiliation that imbued me with the fortitude to pursue the happiness I had believed irrevocably lost. And you, what course of action would you undertake if life presented you with a second opportunity to attain complete happiness? Would you possess the courage to seize it, irrespective of the opinions of others? Because believe me, it is never too late to commence anew.